Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Signal with Snorlax. You guys know the deal. We're going to try to get some signal from markets. I know we're all kind of asking ourselves, like, okay, what is Q4 going to look like? Is seasonality going to be respected? I did a video last week talking about September seasonality. So if you haven't checked that out, go ahead and watch that back maybe before this video. I might discuss some of the same topics again, but I am still a respecter of seasonality, and I'm going to talk about kind of what that means for Q4, as well as I think what that means as we head into Q4 as well. As always, guys, we're going to start with Bitcoin. I'm just going to give you guys a breakdown of kind of some of the different scenarios that I'm watching out for here. If you remember a few weeks ago, I did a video talking about, what is the summer chop going to look like? If we are still chopping up here by October 1st, then, I'm going to continue to say I think that we have set the stage, not just in crypto, but also equity markets, for potentially a melt up much, much higher. Now, we still have 3 weeks left of September. So I do want to preface that comment with that. And kind of the way that I am viewing Bitcoin is largely kind of based around these rotational VWAP clouds that we have. Yearly VWAPs. I think I forgot to mention that, but they do act highly rotational in nature. They have been great signal throughout the course of this market cycle, and I think they will probably be great signal once again. Right now, Bitcoin, we kind of deviated below it. I would say we're still pretty much doing that summer lull chop while altcoins tend to outperform, which isn't anything new. We talked about this last week. Actually, the summer was right in line with our usual seasonality. ETH pumped, ETH Bitcoin pumped, and really, small caps ran in equities while volatility got crushed. So what is about to happen into Q4? And I tend to think, just given the way that the VIX is trading, we're likely looking at an increasing likelihood of long tails. Is that going to be a right tail bias, a left tail bias? I guess we'll just have to see. I mean, some of you have probably seen some posts about the divergence that we're seeing between the VIX and the VVIX, which is measuring basically the movement that we see out of spot volatility, right? The VIX itself, which means that, to me, that we're priming for a really large move, which is why, again, given that context, I think if we see the S&P 500, I think if we see the NASDAQ, ultimately, I think if we see Bitcoin still chopping above, these January and December swing highs that we have set the stage for the melt up scenario. But right now, when I look at Bitcoin, to play devil's advocate, right? Say that we're not just going to trade sideways into the end of the month. What would that look like? Well, right now, we kind of look at this profile since this impulse higher. I would say I don't love that the POC, the point of control, the point of highest volume within this range is still, kind of that high up, given that the buyer of last resort is still Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy. Their stock doesn't look the best, right? So if they're going to buy Bitcoin, they have to sell the common. They have to sell MSTR, and maybe MSTR continues to go lower. There's been this push-pull dynamic between these two assets, but I do think that passive flows will probably take over in Q4 if Bitcoin is still up here. You must hold, in my opinion, above this cloud, because given this supply that we're seeing, if we reject here, you're potentially looking at a deeper rotation. What would that look like? These monthly lows don't look the best. I think that's true for ETH as well, right? I mean, we've kind of built up a lot of this liquidity here. What side is going to get taken? Are both sides going to get taken? I think you can put a decent probability on both sides getting taken. But right now we're seeing ETH kind of defend these highs. It's also defending the lows. Ironically, for once, I feel like you can maybe get more signal out of Bitcoin than ETH, which has just been in like this compression. But yeah, I mean, I do think that Bitcoin needs to be holding above this level, this VWAP cloud, or else you do risk a rotation probably back into the yearly VWAP around 100K. I think that would probably be a good buy. You never want to make any guarantees, right? Because we don't know what things would look like for us to actually get there, especially the altcoin market. But Bitcoin has consistently not given us huge drawdowns throughout this cycle. but reacceptance back into this cloud would definitely, to me, signal that we're probably going to see a rotation lower, and that this was a bearish retest. We could, in theory, just continue to flag from this structure, maybe even something like that into Q4. And I think that would be just fine as well. So for me, I think I still think it makes sense to maintain a bullish bias unless your priors change. And right now our priors are, okay, I mean, we're consolidating above the pre-tariff tantrum highs. Volume is still really good across the board. You have things like Sol picking up. You have things like Doge as well, which I don't have on my watch list, but I think the outlook for meme coins actually looks pretty good as we head into Q4. If Solana, which I think looks like the best looking major at this moment in time, if we are going to just continue to accept outside of this value and continue trending, if Doge is going to get an ETF, and ultimately we're seeing a lot of strength from Pump Fund token as well. I know it's selling off a bit from the highs today, but it's up almost 100%. It's up over 150% from the lows. So the outlook for memes, I think, looks very positive for Q4. You're going to have liquidity tailwinds in Q4. To me, it's kind of all about how we trade into it, as far as how you're looking to position. So, for me, I'm looking on the topic of seasonality. I think Q4 is going to be very bullish. It's just a question of, okay, are we going to be looking to position from a structure that looks like this, grinding up towards the highs? Maybe it's even a gap up to new highs in consolidation, which, I don't think would be completely surprising either, quite frankly, just given the strength that Bitcoin continues to show. It doesn't really matter who the bidder is. Or are we going to potentially be looking at playing Bitcoin from, potentially the yearly VWAP from 90K? Which I think would be a potential scenario if we see Bitcoin reaccept back into this cloud. Which leaves us with ETH as well, because I think when we look at the structure, and I just put out a tweet this week kind of talking about this, ETH structure is much thinner than Bitcoin. So I think you need this to not be a bearish retest for Bitcoin, because then you open the door for a deeper correction on ETH. And then we start to run some of this liquidity. You'll notice some of these thinner pockets of volume within this ETH structure. I mean, if Bitcoin is potentially doing a bearish retest, I imagine that you're likely going to backfill some of these volume pockets, at least this one, maybe even trade down into this structure here. But really with ETH, again, the move is much thinner than Bitcoin. You don't want it to reaccept back into this cloud. It is further away, but I think contextually ETH will ultimately follow Bitcoin's lead. That has pretty much always been the case, and I can't imagine that that the next few weeks in Q4 are going to be any different. So, in the same way that it's kind of a wait and see where we're going to be positioning on Bitcoin into Q4. My bias is that Q4 is going to be very bullish. Like I'm going to have to continue to say that. I don't think the cycle's over. Could the cycle be accelerating? As far as the timing, it could still be a longer cycle, but I would say I'm maybe a little bit more skeptical about that now that we are seeing this job data here over the last 1 to 2 weeks. How does the rate cut FOMC fit into next week? If it's going to be 50 basis points, the market might not like that, right? So I think something to maybe pay attention to is obviously these poly market odds for a 50 basis point rate cut. The move index could be worth checking out as well. But right now, I mean, equities seem to be pretty much, run of the mill strong. We're seeing the VIX get crushed. I would say realistically over the next few sessions, you should begin to see this break down. And if it does not, then, maybe we're looking at the VIX taking a stroll higher into September, or at the end of September, rather. Seasonality we know how seasonality tends to be, but the VIX rises in September. That's not a joke. There is actual data that backs up this, and we will see if it continues this month. But I do think that Q4 we're likely to see the VIX get crushed from wherever it's trading, and if the VIX is in a position where, hey, maybe into the end of September we actually see a puke on it into these deep value levels, then maybe we start to see the VIX trend up with price. which is something that we don't see very often, but I do think could be a scenario that we see this time, just given how, I mentioned it earlier in the video, I think the left and right tails are increasingly widening for this market. Given the way that, the VIX is diverging between the VVIX, we're either, in my opinion, about to, maybe we're going to take a stroll on the VIX higher in the month of September. That would probably lead to a deeper correction across markets. And if the VIX gets crushed, then, I think you're likely to see price continuing to go sideways, maybe even grind higher. And then you're going to see probably a blow off top in Q4. So some questions still left to be answered, but Q4 is coming, guys. Q4 is coming. And I think the tailwinds that we're seeing for meme coins specifically probably make that the sector I'm the most excited about personally. I think we still need to see a little bit more from Bitcoin and ETH. I think Sol looks great. I think Doge looks great. Equities goes without saying. I mean, they're breaking new highs pretty much every day. Unless you see a really outlandishly large move on the VIX higher, you're probably not going to see equities move down too much. So again, we've set the stage with liquidity coming in. I think meme coins, given all the context that I've just laid out, given the assets that are showing strength, pointing towards that being the sector I think that I would want to be allocated to. And that it's not I would want to, I am allocated to meme coins. That's my long exposure. And I guess if you're worried about price trading lower, you can always take out options for that potentially as well. But it's really difficult to play options in this current market, at least if you're a bear, just because of the way the VIX has been trading since April. I mean, it's just been this relentless downtrend. Is the VIX finding value here, or is it potentially looking at a move lower? I guess we'll see. But we all have questions, I know. Are we going to get the expedited 4-year cycle? Are we going to potentially look at a longer cycle? These are questions that I am personally very, very eager to have the market answer. And I think we will have an answer of about a month from now. I don't think it'll take much longer than that. And then you'll be able to have a really clear thought process about how Q4 is likely to play out. And if you should be looking to, I think, potentially exit in Q4, or if it's just kind of, another move higher within, like a pit stop rather, on a much larger cycle that takes us higher. But Q4 is going to be bullish, guys. That is my gut feeling. That is my base case. I'm a respecter of seasonality. I do think it will play. And as I've said a few times already on this video, I think it's just a matter of, where are we looking at majors trading into the beginning of October, because that will, I think, guide not just our decision making, but also, okay, what do these altcoin structures look like as well? Others is coiling. ETH, I mean, it's compressing within this range, man. I definitely am craving some clarity on this chart, especially, but we'll see, guys. Hopefully today's video brought you some clarity. I know I kind of outlined a few different scenarios. I do think that September can still go a number of different ways. I would pay attention most especially to what Bitcoin is going to do at this pivot. Is this a bearish retest, or are we going to accept back within this value? And if we get acceptance back into this value, Bitcoin is likely not just going to these highs, but also new all-time highs as well. I think that you would obviously set the stage for Q4 pretty nicely if that were the case. So thanks for tuning in, guys. As always, this was Signal with Snorlax. We'll be back for another episode next week. But until then, thank you again, as always, for tuning in. And more than ever, guys, please stay safe.